Check the chat. Okay, Maisa, take your activity sheet, please. And welcome to class. I think, Minje, can you turn off the lights in this area? Right. I think this is better. Good, thank you a lot. Okay, again, good morning, everybody. Again, the video is big. I don't know why, because the function is the same. It's quite interesting. By the way, I will lock the microphone because otherwise I'm giving an echo to the ones online. So today we start with the sustainability, right? Which is the last theory part we will consider. And actually, sustainability is a continuation of integration, or integration is continuation of sustainability. Today's kind of introduction and one of the issues. This is basically the same material we saw in materials, but a bit more expanded because we have a bit more time. And as you are tired with the festival, the assignments and everything else, today's session will be a bit softer, right? Not too many data, just things to think about. And then following weeks, I will try to update the course a little bit to be a bit more practical. So you have some kind of probably interesting information. The image is from a famous movie of probably 10, 15 years ago, I, Hero, in which humanity disappears. And this is an interesting image because if humanity disappears, nature takes over, right? And humanity will disappear eventually. We know the sun, our star, the sun, will explode in about 4 billion years, which is a lot of time, but we know the Earth and the sun will disappear. And we know, well, recently, well, we know that our galaxy will collapse with Andromeda, which is the closest one. And some scientists calculated that we are already collapsing, right? We're already crashing. Our influence area is already touching, so it's irreversible. So in a few billion years, the universe, as we know, will be very different. But well, we are moving a shorter scale. The question is, humans are fighting against nature, right? We are nature's enemies. And that's image summarizing very much what we do. And humans, especially architects and even more urban planners, are nature destroyers by definition. And I'm kicked out. Why does this happen? Let's share again, screen, start. Go back to the lecture and see if that works. Let me try again. Second try. This is quite annoying. It usually works. I don't know why lately it doesn't work. Okay, let's cross fingers. So just a reminder about the assignment. I will not repeat everything because we said yesterday, but as some people just miss one class and they looks at the other and do not go to the videos. Remember, we have assignment 4 already open online. You have a full week to do it until next Friday night. You have, once you start, you have to finish, but you have like 6 hours to do it. Probably 1 hour, 1 hour and a half is more than enough. And I will say slowly, those who are in trouble to pass or have a bad grade, this is an opportunity to raise points. I shouldn't tell it, but you can do in group. So you can stick with some friend who does well, and probably will learn something, but you'll have some opportunity to improve, right? And this is volunteer. If you don't want to do it, don't do it, right? It's just an opportunity to improve grades and to test. Today is the submission of MEP. You can do online, of course. And this is the thing by hand. Please go to yesterday's lecture to see what you can do to submit by hand, but still not work too much or not more than you need. And this is the last one, which we'll have to submit next week, right? We didn't explain, but basically the integration we saw already till yesterday. Why this is not working now? Okay. The most important is the point 2, as we commented in class. Please, if you didn't look at it, go back to the lecture, see the video. The handout is not yet uploaded because as I finished the class here, I rushed Susu1 to a final critic. Already final critic. And I just returned on time to come to class today. So, but the section with all the systems together is the most important part of the assignment, right? As we saw in the examples. And then diagrams for green strategies. We don't have time to elaborate on the sustainability, but it is basic diagrams on how you improve energy, material use, water collection, and things like that, right? But the most important is the number 2, right? The integration. Sustainability, you have to go back to what you learned before and then just add something. It will not be the largest part of the assignment. And the final assignment, remember, is the final day. And you can go to the lecture or the previous handouts to see all the instructions. Sustainability is divided in what we will do today. Is about what is sustainable architecture. We don't know, but we have to give a definition to be able to speak about it. And then some basic concepts, which I think are important to start talking about it. And then, as you might remember, I divide it in 5 subjects, 5 areas, and see one by one, right? So today we will try to go to just the first one, social cultural issues, which is one of the most ignored, most neglected issues about sustainability. So about the basic concepts, some who took previous courses or who took my studio may be familiar with this, right? What is this image? We started speaking about galaxies and things like that. It looks a kind of stars, but it's very weird pattern to be, right? That's like a very uniform. If we increase the scale, we can guess a pattern, right? And we zoom even further. Now we have an image we know, right? What is this? Our friends, the United States of America, the map. This is a very familiar. I will try to reduce the light in the front. Okay. So this is, we were seeing just the Manhattan area around there, right? So the first thing we saw was Manhattan and the full island. Now in context, we understand what it is about. And those dots are the post offices, right? This is a way of only having one subject, mapping it, and you have a description of the country. And if you have enough dots, a few dots say very little, but if you have enough dots and enough scale, you get some kind of information, which is interesting. So it's giving the map, but it's not totally, we recognize the image because we have previous knowledge. But the post office tells you about population density, about big cities, about the coasts, for example. The most empty places are the mountain ranges. So only one subject gives you a lot of information, right? And gives you some understanding of the place. Why do I say this? Well, this has to do with the way we understand complex things, right? So reality is complex, and we need to have a lot of information, but information alone, the data doesn't say anything, right? So it takes accumulation of information, have context, relating things. This is at what humans, yeah, I think we are all human beings, are very good, right? And this is what computers, artificial intelligence is very bad at doing, at relating things probably unrelated, right? So with building systems, construction materials, architectural design, sustainability, we have this problem. This is very complex reality. So we have just bits, and as you start learning, things seem very interconnected and very complicated and very illogical. So you need to have a lot of context, a lot of knowledge, a lot of data to process in your mind and have your own vision, your own opinion, right? And 5 years university is not enough. And a few lectures is not enough either, right? In my previous school, I taught a full course on sustainability, 2 years. And what I show here is mostly that course compressed in just 4 or 5 lectures. I don't know how many we have left, right? And of course, one course is not enough, and one lifetime is not enough either, right? But the more we know, the more we understand things, and the more we will be able to do something which is positive. So elaborating on this, and I hope this, yeah, now it works. This is a different map. This is a famous graphic designer, geographer doing this work, right? So you can go, you have the reference, and this is a different map made by putting a line in every street on the States. There's a huge amount of data, and this is just the streets, and gives you a more complete information, right, of the country. So you have a different layer of information. We know it is the same country, but we have the different vision, right? And this is a question to have, to be open to have different points of view, right? And to have different perspectives to the same reality. And the more we are open and we get other opinions, other visions, and we expand our knowledge, we understand better reality. That's the point of things, right? One thing I learned, well, I heard to a scientist a few days ago is telling, well, we're supposed to be scientists here in this is engineering school, right? Also, architecture is more than, well, it's not only science, we have science. But he used to say that reality is so complex that in science and experiments, we have to simplify things. We have to experiment things one at a time, right? And then we have our conclusions, and we know the limitations of those conclusions. And with the context, we understand what is the achievement, right? But telling people, right, this is about communicating science to general public. Telling people that reality is simple is just deceiving them, is lying, right? So if somebody tells you that sustainability architecture is easy and this is the easy way of doing it, this is pure lie, right? You see the difference between simplifying to be able to deal with problems and to say and pretend things are simple. This is totally different view, right? And this is what this lecture is about, right? We have to accept the complexity of things, but we're humans, and we have to find a way to deal with reality by bits, right? And this is what we do in sustainability, for example. So if I ask around about what worries you about the environment and sustainability, probably pollution is general concern. We would agree on that. The climate change, whatever it is, or how it happens, is kind of concern, maybe bigger or smaller. And the energy is a big concern, right? We have suffering it now, and it has been before, and it will continue being, right? However, no matter how much concerned we are, we just expect somebody to provide a solution. I don't know who among us is actively doing things to improve those things, even though we are worried about it. Right? That connects with what we said yesterday about responsibility, right? So, of course, we have the politicians, we have the big companies, we have the powerful guys, But in the end, it is the humans who populate the Earth and who decide what to do, right? And as architects, we have a huge responsibility because architects are nature predators. And the larger the buildings, the more we destroy, the more we pollute. If we go to Google Books, actually the publication is very delayed. I didn't update, so it goes like 5-6 years later. If we see the terms as they are published in books, the pollution was like the main concern in the 70s, right? You see that many books, many publications have the pollution as a subject. And in the 1980s, it's diminished, but in this century, we are less and less concerned about pollution. I don't know why. And on the opposite, energy crisis, we had a first worry in the 70s, and then in the 2000s, this was the first oil crisis when the prices went crazy. And then nobody worries, but this is 2010, right? Today, this would be racing up. Let's close this. Let's go see a bit into detail. If we take out pollution and we speak only about energy crisis, global warming, and climate change, we see that, again, 1970s was the energy crisis. And we started to think about saving energy, but being more efficient. And curiously, even though the energy worry was less and less in percentage, right? Allocations, all we do, or almost everything we do in terms of sustainability is energy efficiency, curiously, right? Are we too late in science, or are we just simplifying in just one direction? What is also interesting is that in 1985, yeah, that's interesting date. 1984 was the famous novel, right? George Orwell. 1985, we start worrying about things. Well, the novel was much before, right? It's 1930s. But we had like global warming and climate change almost in the same level. But like in 10 years, the debate started. It was the discussions, the negationists, the scientists, the politicians, people crying. And then suddenly, climate change overcame global warming, which is also interesting. And that means that we still are not clear. We don't understand well how things happen. But curiously, that climate problem is much more the focus of today's science than it is energy crisis, right? Then 2005 diminishes because the statistics of Google are not so complete. So this is not really a trend. So I mentioned about science, right? And again, we are in engineering school, and we are supposed to have science as a basic. This is why architecture is a very difficult department within engineering, because we don't know much totally. But let's go back to science. This is taken from a National Scientific or some kind of science magazine. This is a bit old, but I think it's interesting because a new study looking at more than 900 climate researchers, now would be like a 9,000 because this research. The majority of scientists with prominence, credentials in climate research believe humans are behind global warming. Is there anything which is out of place, something strange there? This is a literal quotation from a science magazine. What is science about? Science about what you know you can demonstrate, right? It's not about what you believe. And that's the weak point. I can believe my parents, I can believe my wife, my children, I can believe my priest or my pastor, if I'm very, I can believe my heart, my intuition, right? That's the belief. But what I know is what I know, right? And even in science, what we know, we have to adjust because science advances and the facts do not change, but have to be adjusted to the new knowledge, right? So who cares about what scientists believe? What we need is what They know, right, what they're certain about. And this is not about denying or approving, because I will not take a position here. And you should take your position. The question is that in science is not like a votation, like the majority has the reason. In science is who knows is the one who knows, right? And if you know, you keep researching. You may have an hypothesis, but the hypothesis is there. And that makes things very difficult because if we don't have certainties or at least data which proves things, we're still in the belief of the majority. That's very easy to attack. And it's very easy to have the other party doing the opposite. And the other party is the full industry, right? And right now, huge industries, huge companies are the ones who have the real power in the world. And that makes things difficult, right? For Samsung or General Motors or Shell Oil, this is very good news because they have a very good point just to say the opposite, right? And having told me, okay, but we believe this other, we have this data telling this is the opposite. We cannot demonstrate, we also believe we have another 900 scientists who say the opposite, right? So that's the point, right? And it's not only science, architecture, we have an emotional part, we have some part we cannot explain, but we cannot design, we cannot have our work only based on beliefs, right? But we need beliefs because we don't know everything, that's human. But we have to separate very well what we know and what we believe. Right? We have to be able to distinguish because often we confuse them. And when we are in a context in which people share our beliefs, it is very easy to confuse those things. And that creates a lot of conflict between individuals, between trades, between companies, between countries, and so on. I don't know if you know this movie. This is a Hollywood classic, 1957. This was my parents' generation movies. This is from a theater play. And actually, it was so successful that we have remake in Germany, in India, in Russia, in Lebanon, in China, and in India. Right? This is the Chinese title of the movie. This is 12 Angry Men. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's interesting. Why this is a classic and this is so successful? Actually, it's very boring. All the movie is like 2 hours in a closed room. Nothing happens outside of the room. And just 12 people talking. Nothing else happens. 12 Angry Men are the members of a jury in a judgment of a crime, of a killing. And everybody was convinced the suspect was guilty. And you know, I don't know if you have been part of a jury or not. I don't know if the system works here. If you are over 18, you can be called to be part of a jury. Just say, oh, this is summer, it is raining, it's so hot, and I have to go to the party tomorrow. We have to finish soon, and it's so clear this guy killed the. Right. So the whole movie was about it. And you see those guys like, come on, let's finish. It is clear he killed whoever, right? And this guy is the only guy. Well, this is Henry Fonda. He was a very famous actor at the time. He was like really telling, come on, guys, how do you know? We believe he's guilty, but we cannot prove it. He could be, but for the same reasons, he could not be, right? And after one full day, he convinces them one by one to start telling, okay, maybe, yeah, that's true. And it is the whole movie of this guy convincing everybody that we don't know. And if we don't know, we cannot say this guilty, right? So this is like the having independent mind, right? And curiously, this guy in the movie is an architect. In the 1950s, people thought architects are very well educated people, very independent. They have their own opinion. They're able to fight as much as necessary to just be fair, which I find flattering, but I doubt who would be the professional now in 2022, right? this is interesting. So the question is, be able to separate trends from reality and to have your mind like a really creative and to be able to take your own opinions, right? And that's what this architecture about. And with that, it should be enough in this case, right? So it starts with, as in the movie, making the right questions. It's about questions. And we are dedicated in a way that we only want answers, right? And that's very much the case of Korea. Since you're in kindergarten, you are educated to have the right answer. So you pass the exams and you go to the school and you go to the school, you still want to know the answers. So you have this kind of feeling, things are okay if you know the answer. But this kind of, again, simplification. This is like a lying to yourself, right? The world, no matter how much we know, is unknown. We don't know so much about so many things, right? And the more we know, more we are aware of our ignorance. So we have to be always making questions and questioning things. And I have not a right to share beliefs, but only once I believe university is a place to question things, not to get just the recipes to find a good job. But that's the only belief I would share with you. So the first question is, what is sustainable architecture? What makes architecture sustainable, right? And this is what today's lecture about. And we have many labels. 1960s, California, Northern Europe, Germany was bioclimatic architecture. It was the age of ecology, of hippies, of living in nature, love each other, don't make war, right? Those beautiful period of the 1960s. Then completely ecologic. Then we have the green architecture, which is already the 70s and so on. Then we have sustainable architecture, which is something which appeared in the 1980s, 90s, probably. Then zero energy is like more recent. That's one of the trends. And you see again how we just focus in energy, not in many other things. Then zero carbon energy, which is even more restrictive. This is clearly related to climate change and things like that. And then we have the eco-friendly architecture. So the more light the concepts are, the more light are the letters, right? This is the last hit in green architecture, eco-friendly. So the question is, again, I would question the eco-friendly thing. It is very used, and who can define scientifically what is eco-friendly? Give me any science who has friendly as a label in mathematics, in structures, right? We have a load-friendly beams. It's a bit weird, right? So the eco-friendly is just a commercial label. It's just to make things simple and trying to be ecological or whatever without being it. Just telling, okay, I'm eco-friendly. I'm sure your moms are the wisest people in the world, right? Tell you, be very careful with people who looks very friendly, because this is the most dangerous, right? I'm sure you were told that, right? And you realize in your experience, when people are too friendly, something is weird there, right? And this is the point. Mistrust all the eco-friendliness, because that friendliness is hiding something else, right? And I know this is a trend. If you translate from Korean to English, may come like that, or from Chinese, the Qin of Tsinghua or Qinhuangyuan, right? Probably, let's go back. The Qin, maybe this one, right? This is like and you may add the Hua, right? So friendly, harmonic. So I want to question that because the Chinese has a very deep meaning of field, right? And it can be many things. But if you translate that to English, it is pure salesman and politicians rubbish, right? So very careful when you use the English term. Be scientific. So we have a field in which attitudes knowledge, beliefs, and politics are very much mixed. And there's like two very typical attitudes. One is the cynical, the skeptic, and you see it very often. The only sustainable building is the building which does not exist. I can't agree. And the only good person is the person who does not exist, because you cannot do any harm, right? That is very cynical, but it's very common and a smart way of replying, right? And then you have the naive, right? The one says, okay, this building is eco-friendly because it has a certificate, because it has solar panels, it has shading louvers, it collects rainwater, and things like that. This is the simplistic view, right? Both are things that do not help. But that is almost everybody. The people who get out of this too is almost often. Well, this comes very fast. I was thinking to compare bullfight. This is Spanish tradition, right? And South American and or Hispanic American. And I was going to mukbang, but I didn't want to make a fight between Spanish and Korean culture. So I went to French cuisine. So you can see that one is civilized, the other is barbarian. I didn't see anybody making a demonstration in front of French restaurants because they eat meat, right? But we have every year, before every festival, hundreds of people telling, don't be barbarian to animals, don't kill them, right? And this is, in general, considered something barbarian. And I am not personally a fan of bullfighting, but what I think it's kind of a tradition which has a sense and has some kind of meaning, right? And there's many people who really love it, and there's a full world behind that, right? But this is general thing. So most educated people think this is a barbarian tradition, should be abolished at some time. And this is very educated and something we can imitate. It's elegant dining, right? But what is behind that? This is civilized. What is behind that civilized thing? This is overexploitation of animals. This is done in a way that Google Earth has shaded all the American farms of intensive meat production, because it's really disgusting. Those animals are fed just industrial food and as many antibiotics as can be lived, because they cannot be healthy. And this produces a huge amount of pollution. This is a channel with all the dirt those animals produce. So they live in the worst environment they can live, right? And this is what is behind our fine dining and our mukbang and all those things we are. And the samgyeopsal I ate yesterday after the critique, which I enjoyed like everybody, right? But this is the civilized world. And this is what we don't look at. And I don't see people going there to do demonstrations. And this is barbarian. So the bulls, which are in the bullfight, live in freedom, in nature. And it is extremely expensive to raise them, because you have to make them adult and healthy. So the guys who do this business do it because mostly love to it, because they are on the red. They have not benefit, but they love the countryside. We know that keeping the wild bulls also helps the ecology of the place, because not only the bulls, it's the plants, the wildlife there. And we know that those animals are designed to kill each other. This is how nature works. One of the concerns is once the male become adult, and sometimes the female, to separate them so they don't kill each other, but they keep the instinct alive. So they live a happy life, and the end of their life is just killing each other or being killed by a human, right? So I will not go deeper into this, because it's telling how things modify our perception, right? And what we think is educated is not really so, and what we think is barbarian is probably more ecological and more respectful to nature, right? And then we have things, yeah, I was missing this, right? And then what can we say about this, right? The left is Burgos Cathedral in Spain. I chose this because this is probably the best in Spain. This is German, Spain and Germany comes very often, but German family, German architects, let's say, or builders, which became Spanish. So it's like a generation like that. That cathedral is in a town which even today has less population than Tonlemon here. Right? How can you maintain that? But my dad is from there. He would kill before anybody touches that cathedral, right? This is part of the identity. And we do whatever we can to preserve those monuments because they are fantastic. This is like a peak of human production that is very hard to achieve, right? But we have Chamsil Tower. And it was pretended to be something that creates a landmark in Korea because foreigners do not know about Korean culture, and we need to make something that really foreigners say Korea has something to see. That's the starting point of where was the chairman of Lotte, right? And I would say, of course, people of Seoul have the same love for Chamsil Tower, the same identification with it as is the cathedral, right? And the cathedral is totally unsustainable in terms of economy. This is Ishipman, 200,000 people town, right? But it is part of the identity, right? That tower is well absorbed in the economy of Seoul and Korea, the company, but it created so many problems, right? Still, the land around, the aquifers, the stability is still questioned. It changed the winds and the climate in the area. And well, that tower is supposed to be eco-friendly, right? And the cathedral will not pass any kind of sustainability certification. So how can we justify things? How do we decide what's sustainable and what is not? It is difficult. It's very complex, right? So what we know, again, let's try to be scientific. I'm saying, what do we know? I will quote a famous architect. Architecture is an assault of man upon nature. It's an attack to the military, right? It's an invasion. It is a human action against nature. A human organism designed for shelter and work is a creation. So this is telling the two sides of architecture. We destroy nature, but we need it because it is what holds our life, right? There's the beauty and also the dirtiness of architecture. And who said this? Antoine Le Corbusier. Right? So this one guy who was very aware of architecture being something which really destroys. What does it mean? We have to be very careful when we design. And for sure he was, right? All his life, he didn't repeat projects. He was trying to improve things with the intention to make a better place for people to live and better cities for people to develop their life, with mistakes and with achievements, but that was his whole life. And I think this is a message we should get, right? We cannot avoid being destructive. We still need to eat, we need to drink, we need to have the place of work, but we have to be very careful so that destruction is worth, right? That construction, that building is worth the pain we create. And of course, there is no way architecture can be eco-friendly. Architecture is eco-enemy by definition, right? We can mitigate things, but eco-friendly architecture does not exist, right? It is easier that Japan becomes friendly with Korea than architecture becomes friendly with nature. Okay, we go back to the gold books and see how in the 2000s, sustainability took the lead in terminology. Because what I find interesting of sustainability is that you need to assume the complexity of facts, right? It's not just the ecological thing. It's not only the energy. It's not only the carbon footprint. It's about a wider vision. Well, and this is, again, Costa eco-friendly is getting much more trendy, and I worry about it because this is a way of ignoring the real things. So we spoke of the sustainability being trendy after 1985, and probably it has to do with the definition of the United Nations. Probably this is the first time in which the sustainability became mainstream. Sustainability as a term was invented in Germany in the, I think, 17th century. So it's the merit of the Germans. Because of the problem of the increase in the urbanization, which created the destruction of forests. So at some point that they thought this is not sustainable. We need to have the timber. We have to care about our forest, right? But in modern days, it is like the United Nations definition of 1987. And that set the standard and the work becoming mainstream. And says sustainability meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is a great definition, and see how needs, right, is the key word. And if you are already almost graduating, you know that design starts by knowing the needs, right? That's the creating the program and the motivation to make a building or a city. The problem is, again, what do we need, right? We are not clear about what we need now. It is something we can discuss, and we could even have a fight if we have to say what is necessary. How on earth can we know the needs of future generations? Imagine our needs now. Our most urgent need is to have data. We look for data every few minutes. And if we lose the Wi-Fi, the connection, we are like stressed. Cannot be, right? Your grandfathers would never dream that would be the case, right? There's only one generation change. I wouldn't dream it before, right? How can we know, even imagine the needs of 1, 2, 3 generations or 20 generations, right? How many generations we may have until humanity disappears with the explosion of the sunshine, or we have to migrate to another planet, right? So that's a beautiful definition, but very hard to realize in practice, right? Then we have the architects, which came 5 years later, International Association of Architects telling, downgrading a little bit. Let's go only to ecological design. And it's just a meshing of human purposes with the larger patterns and flows of the natural world, right? That's okay, let's be not against nature, with nature. And again, this is poetical. It is a bit more reduced. It is easier to achieve, to understand, but again, very difficult to make. Because we saw this kind of oxymoron, right? We try to make the minimum harm, but we will always harm the nature, right? And this is what we have. We have no more definitions than those. So how should we start? Okay, this is what we said in materials, right? Soul Energy Dream Center, building already 10 years old, which was the showroom of the Soul City care to be on the avant-garde in the world on energy. And see how we have to simplify. This is only about energy, right? Anything else. So it has very good things. The building is almost in every space lit by natural light. And the design is done in a way in which we have diffuse light, not direct sunshine. So you have a very pleasant level of light. The photograph, of course, is difficult to make to give the real aspect, right? But it is very carefully studied to have daylight everywhere. Then this is one of the engineers. It's a German consulting. This is one of the exchange students from Spain when they did the first visit. For 2 years, they were checking the building performance to fine-tune things, right? And it's something that we very seldom see. Buildings are like a one chance thing, one chance experiment. So it is almost impossible to have it right, no matter how much you prepare it. So they have to be 2 years checking how it works and fixing things and fine-tuning a little bit, which is a positive thing to do. Then they have, where they don't have the possibility to change the design, they have this automatic louvers, which give the proper amount of light and radiation. They have, at the time, the best systems, geothermal energy, and they explain how it works. They have, at the time, the best heat recovery system that was imported from Canada. It was the best maker at the moment. And it's very educational, right? And then they were so splendid buying the best that the budget was getting lower and lower, but still they had at the moment the best solar panels. In 10 years, that changed a lot, of course, but I don't know if they continue using the same or they renewed. And finally, this is quite a large building. And it's amazing how small is the active system. So still there's a small percentage which needs energy, right? This is like probably 1/10 or 1/5 of what one building of that size would need, right? And this is a good quality, good efficiency cooling machine from China. To go to the good quality, but within a low price. But they had problems, right? The first thing is the complication. And this is one of the points in which many sustainable buildings die. This is designed by engineers. You need not 1, but 3 full-time engineers to manage this building. And nobody hires engineers. You hire the ayoshi who's lost in those machines, right? And very often the building malfunctions because they just switch off the system, they open the windows, and then all the systems get crazy and it doesn't work. Then the construction. Well, this is a nasty photo. The construction quality is not something that is standard, right? It's a little bit rough. But one of my students visiting this building, when he saw it next to the German engineer, said, "This building doesn't look sustainable at all just by looking at it." And the engineer looked at him and said, "Oh, you learned the lesson very well." Why did he say that? Well, actually, it is intelligent. It is ventilated facade. And we know ventilation helps to have better performance. It is wide, so it doesn't accumulate too much energy and reflects the sunshine. So it doesn't cooperate with the island heat, or heat island, right? And so on. But this material is Korean, right? Korean is a commercial name. It's a polymer, which is super expensive and super energy intensive. So to have this building working, the material is perfect, but it has huge carbon and pollution footprints. And we don't know how it can be recycled or reused in the future. So even if the building is energy efficient, the pollution created to fabricate this material might take tens and tens or maybe hundreds of years to be paid back, right? So this is a kind of a contradiction there, in which just simplifying being only energy efficient doesn't make the building ecological at all. The other thing is the structure is safe, but again, at some point, when the design was finished and it was approved for construction, the government of Seoul thought those German engineers were too expensive, and already the domestic engineers could manage that. And after they make just the building construction, it was too complicated, and they called back the engineers from Germany. So it's kind of in between space, and the structure was a Korean design. And also, when I went inside and look at the German architects, this structure, it is brutal, right? Okay, super oversized. And one thing we studied in structures, right? We have to be safe, but overusing material doesn't make things safer or more ecological. And the overuse of materials, again, something which creates over pollution, carbon footprint, and contradicts the let's say, the eco-friendliness of the building, right? So we have to be safe, but overusing materials, oversizing doesn't help. And actually, it doesn't make things necessarily more safe. Then this is a problem of coordination. This relates to what we saw yesterday or last week about system integration, right? Something weird in those panels, which are done as a kind of display to educate people. They have here the display on how much energy they are producing. Well, this is a problem of miscoordination between engineers or photovoltaic installation and landscape architects. They put the trees over the panels, so they have almost no sunshine. So they demonstrate the production is really embarrassingly low, right? So ignore this. No, don't ignore this. So I have a question for you. We were not able to find another site visit in the time we have, but still we could visit the Seoul Energy Dream Center, the building with that Seoul, which is additional. So the question is, if you did already visit it, because it's open, and if we create a visit, if we organize a visit, if you would join. So if you have enough replies, we could try to get an agreement to have a guided visit to the site, and we see all the systems they have, which is quite interesting. And actually, they have very nice achievements we didn't mention here, but that's interesting. So just let me know if you would be interested in seeing it, and we can try to see it. Again, should be off class day because the class is very short. We don't have time to go to the World Cup Stadium and come back to school on time. But still, you could have the opportunity to have, again, additional assignment and additional points if you want to do it, of course, or volunteer. Also, those online, you can vote. So the conclusion is that we don't know. So what we can do is to apply things we know will help, right? So I think embracing that debate of climate change, carbon, more or less, is not our war. Our concern is to make buildings as less damaging, as less harmful as possible, right? And this is what we can do. So we apply things we know that work, that make things better, and this is what we call the strategies. And the strategies we have are something which makes practical approach, and we just learn from experience, and we increase actions we can take to make buildings better, cities better, right? And that's not only design, as you may know, it's also the use, how we use buildings. As we are users, we have also to change our mindset. Until then, even at the school, if we don't pay for electricity, that electricity is when it's polluting somewhere, right? But at school, we never turn off the lights nor the computers because we already paid our student fee that was there. But that's the attitude which we need to change if we're really concerned about the environment. So I try to summarize. So this is not original. Many books and theories go about the strategies. Usually it's like 10 or 12, but it's like too many, right? So we have to be practical. And I have 5 sets, which are kind of meaningful. If we, so social, site, energy, material, and design, which I think put everything. The usual 9 or 10 are energy, pollution, materials, water, mobility. Mobility is about transportation and infrastructure, health, site, and then we have the user and the builder, the client, and so on, right? If we want to see how they relate, and sometimes to write some papers on theory, we try to see if we can mix things to have a logical thing. Actually, the cultural issues have to relate to the user, but sites relate to the energy, to pollution, to water, to the site, of course, energy to pollution, materials, of course, with water, with pollution again, with energy, because we have to produce them, and also with health. So many materials are not healthy. And then cultural issues have to do, of course, with the user and the client. If we try to make a theory as it happened with the integration, we have a nightmare. It's a labyrinth, right? This is why we have to go just to individual actions. The question 2 came very fast, but it's just you have like the columns on the sheet. Copy the 5 and the 8 or 9 in the right. And you don't need to copy the connections. Try to think your own connections. How do you think these are related? And there's a way to at least interiorize and to work in those few items or subjects we just defined or mentioned. Yeah, this is the exam you can talk, you can discuss, because probably you might agree or disagree with those, and this is perfectly okay. It's for you to think how the issues are related to each other. Okay, so I look forward to see your opinions and how much it matches or just contradicts what I proposed here. The point is thinking about things, right? And have your mind busy with that. So if we go to our SPCs, right, our TR accreditation system, actually we have out of 25, like 7 species, which is a lot, right? It's like almost 1/3 of the species are related to sustainability. Of course, the sustainability city and architecture, but site planning has a lot to do with it. Is when we destroy forests and cultivation areas to make cities. The integration has to do, and actually in most certifications of a LEED and so on, one of the items which give you points is how integrated the project is, right? The adaptive reuse, of course, reuse is about reducing waste, right? The environmental control systems, that's and the building service, because this has to do with the comfort, energy, and health, surely. And materials and methods, as you know, because you all passed materials and you know how important it is to have the right choice and right use of materials to be sustainable. So even though we have only one SPC related to sustainability, a big part of the species of the items we are required to learn impact and are related to sustainability. And that supports the comment I said that architecture, whatever we do, has a huge impact in the environment, whatever we do. So let's go fast because I didn't update this part. This is mostly what we saw in materials, but it's important thing. We have 15 minutes left to see about social and cultural issues, which, as I mentioned, is probably the most neglected and the less evaluated, but probably one of the most important. This is our culture, right? We are Sobi Sahwe, we are consumption society, and come on, everybody loves sales. But what is the paradox of the sales? You know, you save 50%, you don't save. You spend a lot more because you buy many things you don't need. In the end, you don't save. That's the trick, that's the trap, right? And with especially with energy efficiency and energy savings, very much the same happens. The more efficient systems we have, the more we use them and the more energy we use. I will give you the example of LED, for example, right? LED can use maybe 10% of a normal bulb, maybe less. And many countries do not sell any more light bulbs, right? Because they waste energy. We already saw that light quality is better in the old bulbs, but we ditch them in order to save energy. But we change bulbs by LED, and we don't care. It's LED. The light is always open. It's always on. And we have a Chamsel Tower with tens of thousands of LED in the facade, right? And it is opens every night to display how elegant it is, and nobody cares with LED. But come on, they waste little. But if you keep the all the time open, on, and you put lights when you don't need them, you're in the end spending more energy, right? If we have one light bulb, right, which spends like 9 times more energy than the LED, for example, say 10 times, right? We are educated since we're small to switch the light when we use it and switch off as soon as we don't need it. It's kind of embodied. So probably along a day, you may use this bulb probably for 1 or 2 hours, right? But you switch to LED, and in some houses, they have the LED 24 hours. In the end, you spend twice the energy. And you put LED when you don't need them. And that's the paradox of savings. That is a very small example, but this is documented. This is what we call the Jevons paradox. So there was some smart guy who did an economical study a long time ago, telling the more efficient systems we create, the more use we make of them and the more energy we use. That happens with the cars. After the 1970s, the energy crisis, cars become more and more efficient. They spend less fuel, you can do more kilometers. That means people using more the car and buying more cars and making longer trips and more often. So in the end, because you're efficient, you spend much more fuel than when you are not efficient. So making buildings more efficient, using efficient systems doesn't make savings because the user will feel you can use anything. And that's a question of the user of the education, but also you have to be aware of the paradox. If we make a very efficient building and we sell it, say this building is zero energy because it produces as much as it consumes, probably the user will make it not zero energy, will consume much more than necessary. Let's go to the opposite part. This is the anti-consumption society. Things are changing, but still Cuba is one of the poorest countries on earth, right? We could have gone to North Korea or I don't know other countries, but here we have some kind of contact. And this is not, but let's pretend this is a pillow shop. Well, in Cuba, one family, if they need a pillow, they go together and they have a meeting, say, okay, we need a pillow because we have a more person or we have more bed and we don't have pillows. So I start thinking, cannot we mend old ones? We cannot make ourselves. We cannot get from somebody who doesn't use it. When they're sure they have no option but buying, they go to the shop, give me a pillow, they go back, and that's it. That's poor country, but poor people are really sustainable, are really practical, right? You have the famous firm, last year's Pulitzer Prize, Lacaton Vassal, right? This French couple. Well, one of the appraisals they got is being very sustainable. They're really reasonable using. They both were educated in Africa, right? Well, Africa is a huge continent, right? But they said African people are so clever, so practical, so much on the point to use what you need, only what you need, without creating a big imbalance of things. And they brought this kind of thinking to Europe, right? So the point is what we said in the UN definition of sustainability, the needs, right? The first question is, what do we need? But really, what do we need? not what we think or we're convinced we need. Right? So the first question is, that new building, that new city are really necessary or not? And as an architect, it's a big conflict because, again, Lacaton and Vassal are famous because they were given a commission to renew one square in France. They went there and said, this is perfect. If we touch it, we'll make it worse. So use this money for something else. And they did some improvement, but didn't change the square, right? But usually as an architect, it will be against your business. So that's a very difficult thing to answer. But again, you have to be sure things are necessary. This is an example you saw in materials. When DDP was created, Tondemun Undon Jandiok became Tondemonyok Samun Monyok, right? The longest station name doesn't fit in the maps. But they said, okay, we have to make it look cool, should be designed area because it's not longer the stadium. And they embraced to make it elegant. But the question is, the station was perfect, it needed to be fixed. The ceramics are eternal materials. This is a really good quality ceramic and quite well constructed. So they changed it just to make it look trendy. So the company who built it got some money. This is good. You move the economy, but so in the negative part, you made a lesser quality material. You make the station narrower, and now all those metal plates are scratched, are bumped in just a few years, right? So the quality was actually downgraded. Right. And it was actually not necessary. It's less space to move in, and it is even darker, right? So dark looks like a cool and more designed and so on, but we said that many people have difficulties in vision. In a subway station, to have a deep light is not a good idea, right? Because you create more insecurity in people who have need to have a good vision. When we go to the States, the largest city in California is unfinished. This is 1958. Some guy said it is the city of the future, and he bought a lot of land in the desert, Sonora, and he created infrastructure. You can see from the satellite. That city was planned for 3 million people, right? Now, about 14,000 people live there. So you can see the houses like far away from each other. If you like to be alone and have no neighbors, this is the place to go. Actually, you can buy land very cheap. You have the American dream. This is perfect opportunity. But come on, what's the meaning of doing that, right? So you can see that this is the most dense area, but to maintain the city for only 14,000 people is kind of crazy, right? China is also extreme in that case. And I heard that, well, China is urbanizing very fast. It's creating new cities, and they're doing well. So we have 5 minutes left. So there's a point in which the cities, the moment they reach 25 million people, they start counting. They keep growing, but they say the city 25 is already finished. But we think that some cities will reach 100 millions in one city in the future. But some of them are not successful. And the case of Ordos is really painful because they create a huge planning with the best planners, the best architects. They bought projects from most trendy guys, and it's kind of architectural exhibition. Almost all office was trendy did the project, but the city, nobody moved there. So the authorities were very clever. So China may be very, let's say, non-democratic country, but they're very clever, right? And they're powerful. And they said, okay, how people go there? As the Pak Chong did in Seoul, put the schools in that city. So families will go, of course, you have the public offices there, so you have to live there by mandate. See what happened with the public offices in the south of Seoul, right? And then the elite schools are there also. If you want your children to go to a university, you live there. As it happened, people moving from Gambuk to Gangnam in Korea, right? And now the city plans to have not the population they wanted, but still they kind of made it up. The case of a Chunshuihe, I have no idea how it is pronounced, is more terrible because they create a city in which only the public employees live there. And why this happens? Because the city already existed and people like to live in their place, not in the new town, right? So many cities are successful, but many other are like a really ecological disaster because it's the destruction that doesn't make any meaning. And I go to Spain, which is the same. And Spain is supposed to be a democracy. Well, this is the satellite view of Madrid. This is the central area, historical city. And this is the 19th century expansion. And this 20th century towns, right? Okay. Half the city goes to the north. This area, just to see the scale, is all new towns, which are just left over. And we have more than those. And if you show only one small part, this is finished streets with the facilities unused. That's crazy. And I could fly recently on a Windows site during daytime, and I could see small towns having the same problem all around the country. Right? Huge areas totally unused in big, small towns, right? And so on. The second question is the user. So how much technology can people manage? This is what is on in the Seoul Energy Dream Center, right? So if people don't know how to use the buildings, or don't know how to really make advantage of the LED or the very complex systems, it doesn't work. And there's a lot of parodies. It's a movie in which the guardman was in charge of a very complex system, and the visitor was losing the patience, just waiting for him to find the right button to call the place he has to go, right? It's kind of parody, but this happens every day with those eco-friendly buildings, which are eco-nightmare for the users. And just having people, this is an example anecdote, just to have a basic education make huge savings with very, very simple actions, with a very ordinary building. Just to switch off the lights, put in timers, and using the energy in a reasonable way. And that's what they say in the Dream Energy Center. Often the employees will open the windows and the doors, and then the systems will be totally crazy, and the building will collapse. Well, the system will be restarting, and they will be using more energy than necessary, just because people living there are humans, are not part of the program, of the computer program they designed for the building. And then just to end, the local culture and customs. We're in kind of global culture, but come on, even within Korea, Gyeongsang and Cholla have different ways of life, right? And Seoul the same. Even within Seoul, so the culture, no matter how much global we are, we understand life in different ways, and we live in different ways. And we have to understand that, right? So when we design, when we plan, we have to be very aware of the local cultures. Even if you are from Seoul and you work in Seoul, probably the people you're working with is not the same kind of a social class or the same kind of a custom we have, and you have to be aware of that. But if you work in a different country, you have to be much more aware of that, right? So this is, for example, we have only 1 minute. Well, this is Beijing, right? This is the plan of Beijing, and this is the plan of Seoul, drawn in the same period. And the theory of urban planning in China and the Seoul use on Beijing and Seoul use the same book, but the result is totally different. Why? Because a Chinese operation is like a really geometrical, making an ideal city, erasing the more or less the environment. Seoul geometry exists, but this is a kind of integrating mountains and streams and the forests into the city. And you can see how the plan is drawn, right? You see a few houses and a lot of streams and mountains, and that's what creates the map. And if we go to Hahui Maul, it is the same. They have to readjust things because the geography is different, but just to make the city work. But then when we plan new cities, we do this, right? And when we make new cities more eco-friendly, we do the same, which hardly connects to that tradition which makes Korea unique. As an example, Rizkan. He did a famous city for Bangladesh, and he did employees' houses. And he made a big mistake. When they opened the building, the they had like we have in Korea, kitchen and dining together. And that's kind of impossible in Islamic cultures. So as soon as they finish, people were in panic. They have to make a very expensive change in the houses to make the kitchens totally separated from the dining rooms. And we have a famous planning. This is quite recent planning for a city by a Korean company. And that goes to our last question. We do usually finish and we leave the next class come in. What is this plan? This is a famous large Korean office. This is a planning for a new town, one of many new towns we have around. But the landscape, this could be Gangwon-do, Cholanam-do, Gyeongsangnam-do. I don't know if the translation is correct, or somewhere else. Make your bet, 10 seconds to reply. 10 seconds. Let's see how many people have it right. Also online. And Pali, because I have to finish. People are waiting outside. You have -1 minute to finish the class. Okay, solution is Tanzania. Okay, and the people in Tanzania are very happy because they want to have the glass towers. But imagine have this kind of town in a tropical climate. It is crazy. And the same happens. This is Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh. Again, come on. This is an unlivable place, that climate. But again, Vietnamese are so happy with it because they are similar in image to Seoul, right? So this is the summary of those issues, things for thinking about. And with that, we finish. And if you have any question, comment, complaint, culpion, whatever, let me know, and I promise to reply. And I will try to update all the assignment I have online. I will try to dispatch MEP as soon as I can. Have a nice weekend and enjoy the festival. See you.